Rest in peace to Prince, man. Today we got the Prince documentary 2018. I had to do this one. I did Michael Jackson yesterday. And make sure y'all go tap in with that one. Um I also did the Whitney Houston one. Got a lot coming. Rest in peace to Prince once again. A lot of people had speculations on his death too, and a lot of artists in general death. Said something about him pacing back and forth in front of a store, knowing that he was gonna die or something like that. Let me know what's your comments on that. But without further ado, we're gonna get straight into the video.
Prince, outrageous, iconoclastic, oozing charisma,
Hmm.
a 5'3" rock god, and
You
a
saw
man who
three?
very few people truly knew or understood.
I felt that he was super cautious, like he had trust issues. I felt that's what I was called a lot of the time because I just think he wanted to have people around him that he felt safe with.
At the heart of Prince is someone who was consumed by music and needed everyone around him to understand that.
The song that became Prince's theme tune and the iconic film of the same name was an anthem and a story of redemption. It established Prince, the superstar, and resonated around the world with 22 million sales.
Back in the game.
Prince is the equivalent of a musical Einstein, if you may, combined with a little bit of Mozart.
3, 4.
Prince's genius was never in question, yet the seeds of his self-destruction were sown long before he became a star.
I don't think he ever felt true love. I don't think he ever felt true acceptance.
Prince shot to global fame, propelled by the need to free himself from his past. He never escaped the guilt and shame of his early years.
It was beyond an obsession, it was a compulsion.
Prince expressed his deepest feelings in his music,
Please, Lord, spare me.
and he wove his childhood trauma into iconic songs and timeless hits like When Doves Cry.
I just want to come back in the house. I'm cold, Dad.
Life is very tough when you're a 12-year-old, short, teased African-American with no money who can't come home.
His damaged past compelled Prince to look for home and family in all the wrong places. His childhood, tainted by sex, set him on a collision course, personally and professionally.
Do you really believe that the young people of America should be listening to this kind of thing?
Not at all, ma'am.
To protect himself from the world, Prince built his own private palace and named it Paisley Park.
We used to say he was the lonely guy. We used to call him the lonely guy because we didn't want him to be lonely.
Throughout his life, Prince cut himself off from those who loved him and could help him.
He was like a son to me. I was like a dad to him.
Prince abstained from
That was
recreational
Michael
drugs,
Rappaport.
yet died on the 21st of April 2016,
That went
aged
so fast.
57, following a lethal overdose of painkillers.
So the person is dead here.
I just could not believe it. I said, no, can't be true. But it was true.
Prince, above all, wanted to fly with the angels, and yet his demons would finally catch up with him.
What if everybody around me split? I'd be left with only me. I'd have to fend for me.
And Prince.
Prince, one of the world's most successful musicians, died alone behind the wire in the fortress he created. There was no one to help him.
As I got to know Prince, it became pretty clear that he had some pretty serious issues.
Prince spent his whole life unhappy. I think he spent his whole life alone.
And I think he was afraid of life, in the sense that it hadn't always been kind to him.
You look towards the end of his life, you can see he was trying to repair his childhood. Even that shot of him riding his bicycle around his complex in Paisley Park, he just looked like he was a kid again. He even went back to how his hair used to be in the 70s, this big afro. If you look at him, he went full circle, came back to being that little boy again.
Prince's story starts and ends in Minneapolis, capital of Minnesota in the Midwest.
It's probably from not really being able to live his childhood and want to relive it over again, trying to find things to, like, bring back nostalgia to go back through that.
Born in 1958, Prince was different from the start. He was given a rock star's name, Prince Rogers Nelson.
Most of my friends in New York would say, "Why are you in Minneapolis? There are no black people there."
The odds were stacked against him at a very early age, simply into the community he was born into, a certain amount of poverty. Being black in Minnesota, especially in the 60s.
Yeah.
Prince's father, John Lewis Nelson, and his mother, Mattie Shaw Nelson, were an outwardly respectable, God-fearing couple.
The eyes of the Lord are upon the righteous, and his ears are open unto their cry.
The family were Seventh-day Adventists, a strict Christian sect that discourages smoking and drinking and believes failing to walk next to God defiles the human spirit.
For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that is in them.
Prince's parents prayed for their son because they feared he was different from everyone else. Prince would open up about this for the first time 4 decades later.
I've never spoken about this before, but I was born epileptic.
Stop.
And I used to have seizures when I was young.
Oh.
And my mother and father didn't know what to do or how to handle it.
Some religious communities saw epilepsy as a gift from God. Mostly it was seen as insanity, or worse still, possession by the devil, with no greater sin than a seizure in church.
Don't let me down, honey. You know what they'll do to you in church if it happens again.
But sometimes I can't help myself, Mom.
Just put your trust in God. You don't need me to protect you, child. You're a big boy now. You're my big, brave boy. You're my big, brave, talented boy. Huh? Uh-huh.
Prince's condition threatened to bring the family to breaking point. John Lewis Nelson's job in a factory could barely support his wife and children, let alone pay medical bills.
Someone in the crowd replied, "Teacher, I brought you my son, who has a spirit that makes him mute. Whenever it seizes him, it throws him to the ground. He foams at the mouth, gnashes his teeth, and becomes rigid. I asked your disciples to drive it out, but they were unable. How long must I remain here with you? How long must I put up with you?"
He was so deeply ashamed. What people don't understand, I don't think, is his sense of shame.
The stigma of epilepsy would haunt Prince, echoing through his life for years to come. When performing his 1994 track, The Sacrifice of Victor, Prince can be seen miming a strange seizure or fit. The lyrics describe how he became epileptic through a difficult birth and then emerged a victor over his affliction.
My mother told me one day I walked into her and said, "Mom, I'm not going to be sick anymore." And she said, "Why?" And I said, "Because an angel told me so." Now, I don't remember saying it. That's just what she told me.
As a boy, Prince was taken to see his father play. in a downtown club on Hampton Avenue, Minneapolis, something Prince would never forget. A production line worker and religious zealot by day, John Lewis Nelson was a jazz pianist by night.
Y'all sure looking real cozy up there tonight. All right, let's enjoy ourselves.
He gave himself the stage name Prince, the same name he called his son. On stage, John Lewis Nelson was not the father Prince knew. No Bible, no lectures, just all the forbidden fruits: wine, women, song. The ladies loved him, yet John Lewis Nelson would never make it as a professional musician. Financial pressure meant he could not quit his day job. He smoked and drank at home, despite telling others not to do so. A bitter man, he would become deeply jealous of his son.
A really brilliant musician in John Nelson.
Yeah,
also very...
people think that's rare to happen, and I've seen it a lot. I've seen mothers jealous of their daughter or fathers jealous of their son, and it's weird to me.
Narcissistic, selfish man who was a far better musician than he was a father.
Please, Daddy. Will you teach me to play?
Sit right down, son. This is a fine instrument, Prince. It's not a toy! Think you're better than me, do you? Get out of here. I gotta practice. I got a gig tonight.
Shaking my head, man.
How can I put this? My father he was so hard on me. I was never good enough. And there was something about that, it was almost like the army when it came to music.
John Lewis Nelson gave his son a musician's name and then refused to help him play. Ruled by a religious man who did not practice what he preached, Prince grew up in a world tainted by hypocrisy.
In my household, with my grandparents, we very much knew that that was wrong and you weren't allowed to do this, but you were allowed to do that. It was either you were a Christian or you weren't. There was none of this mixing it. But I think with Prince, it was a little bit more complicated.
The contradictions of his childhood marked Prince. From the beginning, he wrestled with angels and demons, setting a pattern he would repeat throughout his life, trying and failing to keep his demons at bay. The problems of his early childhood, the epilepsy, the powerful father and weak mother left Prince feeling vulnerable, unsure of what was right and what was wrong.
So there were times he had to look in the mirror and just really, really wonder what is his purpose on this planet.
At school, things were no better. Prince was the short black kid with the name everyone laughed at.
He had told me when he was very young, remember I met him when he was 16, what he wanted most in life was to become famous. Music wasn't his first love. His first love was really basketball.
Prince shot hoops hour after hour. Yet the one thing he really needed for basketball was beyond his reach.
He was on teams, and I think he really came into himself. But as he got older, he stopped growing. When he finally realized that basketball wasn't going to be a dream he was going to be able to realize because of how tall he was, I think he turned to music and poured all of his heart and soul into that.
Being short would not stop Prince from becoming a musician.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Sex Machine, I was sure that was one of the records that probably influenced him, if only because their very unique style of playing bass, which was a turning point for young black musicians. Prince more than once mentioned to me riding his bike after school to the record store to get the new James Brown 45 that he just had to have.
Prince played obsessively every night in a friend's basement, teaching himself as many instruments as he could.
That's dope.
Throwing himself into music with guts and soul.
He did not want to fail at anything. He had that desire that he is going to win. He's going to do every single thing that he can, and if he don't make it, it's not going to be his fault.
Prince chose a hard path. Everyone said a black artist could never succeed in Minneapolis.
Well, they was wrong.
That's why his own father struggled to break through.
Minneapolis, when I started my recording studio, was a kind of a cow town. I mean, it was a very white country rock environment.
Back in Brooklyn, we had black radio stations, like 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 radio stations. Here they had one.
Prince set out to prove everyone else wrong, as he would repeatedly do throughout his life. After 3 years of mastering guitar, keyboards and drums, the groundwork paid off, as Prince later recalled on the Tavis Smiley Show.
I taught myself how to play music, and I just stuck with it, and I did it all the time. And sooner or later, people in the neighborhood heard about me, and then they started to talk about me.
The word had spread throughout the black community that there was a place you could go, and there was this Englishman over there that loved recording R&B and black music.
So when he was 15 and I came here, he was playing with Grand Central. That was his band.
Hi, Mr. Moon, right?
I was contacted by the mother of the band, who was the manager.
Nice to meet you.
She contacted me and she said she wanted to do a demo tape.
I don't need your charity, Mr. Moon. I got my money. I can pay.
And so this lady that had brought this group into the studio that was producing them, you know, really had the support, I think, of the community, and everyone kind of helped them.
This boy here on the block, he plays everything, and I mean everything.
So I started listening to him, and I realized he had talent.
Okay, after that child, Mr. Moon, he don't say much, but he got a volcano of emotions under the surface.
And I realized he could play all the instruments. And I thought, this is the answer to my prayers. So after months and months and months of working with Prince, very, very close basis, producing this music, I had him named. We had his first big song packaged up, Soft and Wet. We had his identity created, and we had his demo tape built. And so now it was time to go to the next step.
The first time I heard Soft and Wet, that song, I was immediately like blown away because I just felt it sounded so different to everything else.
By 1978, Prince had his first recording contract and his first manager.
What struck me was the depth of the music that was being made. It did not sound like one person playing all the instruments. hear this falsetto come in of this, it was a vulnerable, there was a vulnerability to the voice that immediately caught my attention.
Prince always set the rules. He said everything must be done as he wanted. Warner Brothers, Prince's record label, found this out the hard way.
We're so excited, Prince. This sounds great. The label sent me down from A&R just to listen in for a bit. Just wondering about the bass line on this track. What do you think? A little bit more, a little bit less?
Get out of my studio. Yo. He told you?
He says that to everyone.
It was clear that there were other issues that went into his personality and his impatience, his demanding perfectionism, that went beyond a normal perfectionist.
He just wanted to prove that, hey, I'm somebody. I got something to say, and I want you people to experience what I have to say.
It wasn't like we said, hey kid, we think we can make you a star. Let's put you on our journey. No, he was on a journey.
Already.
And I always felt that, you know, if we could just support him through that, because he knows what he wants.
And he went for it.
Once Prince, the unknown boy from Minneapolis, signed his first $1 million record deal.
Okay.
He was on his way to becoming one of the world's greatest rock stars. Success would bring Prince the power and identity he craved, while the exposure of fame would always be painful for him. This first became clear in 1979. Soon after being signed by Warner Brothers, Prince's single, I Want to Be Your Lover, shot to number 11 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart. To promote it, Prince went on Dick Clark's American Bandstand. All went well, until Dick Clark came to interview him.
You made a couple of demonstration records when you were a teenager. You're barely more than that now, are you?
19.
19. How many years ago did you make these demos and then have offers on them?
Oh.
Prince clammed up and could hardly speak.
He comes back from Los Angeles. He comes over my house, and I go, what's wrong with you? What happened, man? What, you know, you're on a national TV show. Dick Clark is asking you these questions, and what happened? Because I know he's not like that.
And why would you turn it down?
They wouldn't let me produce myself.
You were 15 at the time.
Yeah.
Would they think you didn't know what you were doing?
Don't know.
I just couldn't get it. And he said to me, he said, Pepe, he said, at that very moment, I realized that millions of people were watching me.
Did somebody tell you
Thanks,
you
it
played
hit him.
every instrument on this album? Is that correct?
Maybe.
No, that's you're very shy, modest. How many instruments do you play?
And at that point, he just froze. And he told me right after that, he says, you know, he says, that will never happen
again.
Then he started controlling all of his interviews because he didn't like that feeling. He didn't like that feeling. He wasn't in control.
After the humiliation of American Bandstand, Prince agreed to only a handful of press interviews for the rest of his career. In 1985, aged 27, Prince gave a rare glimpse of the man behind the mask when he was persuaded to speak to Rolling Stone magazine. This would be the most honest interview he ever gave. Prince would only talk if certain conditions were met. Rather than being at home, he was at the wheel of a Ford Thunderbird, taking the reporter around Minneapolis. Prince was in the driver's seat, and if things got too revealing, he could always drive away.
I'm not used to this. I really thought I'd never do interviews again.
Prince agreed to open up because the Rolling Stone writer, like him, was a local boy.
We were born at the same hospital, almost a year apart. My father went to the same schools as he did, both my parents.
There have been a lot of things said about me, and a lot of them are wrong. I don't mind criticisms. I just don't like lies.
When he
That's
motioned
fair.
me to get in his car, he struck me as incredibly shy, but there was something wrong.
The story Prince told was of someone who would struggle all his life to escape his childhood. There was a void that could never be filled.
The things that happen to us as children are so seared in our brains and they never leave it, and especially at such a young age.
I think when one discovers himself, he discovers God.
When Prince agreed to be interviewed by Rolling Stone magazine in 1985, he was at 27 a superstar. He was also sending the American establishment into a frenzy of disapproval. One critic said Prince's taboo-breaking lyrics were gushing with lust. Tipper Gore, wife of Senator Al Gore, set up the Parents Music Resource Center to protect the young people of America. Top of the list of Tipper's so-called Filthy 15, from a range of different artists, was Prince's song Darling Nikki. Tipper wanted to send out a warning, buyer beware.
I bought Purple Rain for my daughter. We heard the song Let's Go Crazy on the radio, and Prince is a musical genius. I agree with that, and I like some of his music. But I didn't feel like the song Darling Nikki was appropriate for my 11-year-old and my 8 and my 6-year-old.
Do you want to read the couple of lines from Darling Nikki that you find offensive?
I'd be glad to. It says, I met a girl named Nikki. Guess you could say she was a sex fiend. I met her in a hotel lobby masturbating with a magazine.
Let's hear it. Stop. Do you really believe that the young people of America should be listening to this kind of thing?
Not at all, ma'am. Completely unacceptable.
So what's the plan? How are we going to stop people buying this music?
Yo, get the fuck out
I've
of here.
spoken to the Recording Industry and Association of America. They've said they will be willing to consider some kind of warning or packaging to the outside of the disc. I've worked something up here, ma'am. A prototype. Warning, parental advisory, explicit content.
You think it will work?
My honest opinion, ma'am, teenagers want this music, and they're going to want it even more if we put the stickers on.
You have so little faith in the youth of America?
Get out of here, Karen.
Meet me at 2 o'clock in the conference room, Michael.
The impact was, of course, ironically, positive because there were acres of press coverage of this. And people thought, gee, I've got to hear what this is all about. So there were probably about 500,000 people who heard Darling Nikki who otherwise would not have heard it, thanks to Tipper Gore.
He realized that the sexual component was something that could be marketed and be used to empower him with the fans and empower his music.
Prince's explicit lyrics were not just written to shock and to sell records. They came from somewhere deep inside, from when he was young, too young.
So, which one of your parents are you more like?
My dad and me, we're one of the same. He's a little sick, just like I am. It takes the music to get him going. My mom's the wild side of me. She's like that all the time.
Prince grew up in a sexually charged household. His mother, Mattie, was an aspiring singer when she met Prince's dad. Even after 2 children came along, Mattie Shaw was still out at night trying to restart her career.
I've often wondered about Prince's relationship with his mother. I didn't know her well and met her long after Prince was established as a celebrity. And it comes to mind that as a nightclub singer with a very outgoing personality, it must have been a little puzzling for a young kid to know that his mother is wearing tight dresses and flirting with people from the stage of a nightclub, singing sexy songs.
Don't tell me you ain't seen these before.
Their frustrations as musicians set Prince's parents at each other's throats. In 1968, when Prince was 10, the marriage ended. Mattie quickly took up with another man and then decided the time was right to begin Prince's sex education.
I know that in his interview with Chris Rock on MTV some years ago, he mentioned the fact that at about age 10, I think he said she showed him a Playboy magazine.
I think there was some sort of plan to initiate me heavy and quick. So I was given Playboy magazines.
Get out of here.
Yeah, and there was erotic literature laying around that was very easily picked up. And
Chris Rock, a legend too.
You know, it was pretty heavy at the time.
Reading Mattie's magazines as a child left Prince confused about his own sexuality and about a mother who gave him pornography when all he needed was love.
Was she someone who was perhaps concerned out of some kind of ignorance that her sensitive, artistic-prone young son might be gay? And I'll find out and I'll show him a Playboy and see how he reacts. You know, who knows why or what actually happened, but it just doesn't sound like the normal upbringing of most young kids.
Facts.
Prince's background was unstable, and his sexual identity was unstable.
We were on the plane going to North Carolina. He had an afro, right? He gets up and he goes to the bathroom. He takes his bag and he goes to the bathroom. He comes back after, and I'm looking at my watch, I'm going like, gee, man, this guy's been in there for a long time, you know. He comes back and he's got curlers in his hair. He was in the bathroom curling his hair. So he comes out and I go, looking at him going like, oh, I didn't say anything, you know, because I didn't know. Maybe he was a switch hitter, maybe he was gay, maybe he was straight, maybe I didn't know, you know? And so I didn't say nothing. He sat back down and we just continued on.
As a rock star, Prince would always be surrounded by women. He was linked with his backing singers and co-stars throughout his career. And yet intimacy would be problematic all through his life.
When he did get signed, that's when the girls started coming. And we'd be walking, you know, down the street or something, and the girls would say, hi, Prince, you know, hi, Prince, hello, Prince, you know. And then Prince would look at me and says, Pepe, you know, last year that girl wouldn't even talk to me.
I saw him as straight because of all these gals that are around him, but I did often think that maybe he wasn't really interested in sex, which seems so bizarre, really.
Sexual ambiguity, never feeling normal, problems with intimacy. Prince toyed with his public for years, constantly exposing different aspects of his sexual being. He dressed up, or didn't dress. Sometimes he presented himself as hypersexual. Sometimes as buttoned up. And sometimes both at the same time.
When I saw what he looked like, I couldn't believe it. Because I thought, oh, he's cute, but he's got like suspenders on and some sort of crutch thing going on, covering his crotch. I was like, whoa. And then he had on like heels, like over the knee boots. And I mean, he was really out there.
So I've got to ask, why the high heels?
People say I always wear high heels because I'm short. I wear high heels because women like them.
I didn't even know he was 5'3".
His energy was super male. I mean, alpha male. There was no feeling for me with him whenever I was with him that I never felt effeminate. He's really a man. That's what I'm trying to say. He was the black guy that was pushing boundaries like David Bowie was for white guys. Bowie pushed it, and Prince was our Black Bowie.
And then one iconic record changed the game. In his 1984 album Purple Rain, Prince laid bare without ambiguity the demons of his childhood: shame and self-blame.
For me, it was all autobiographical because he was a troubled kid. I mean, you know, from the get-go, he was different. And that's tough.
After his parents' marriage fell apart, Prince felt completely alone in the world.
So do your parents have much of a relationship with each other?
These days, my parents live very close to each other, but they don't talk.
So once your mother remarried, she took less care of you. I'm guessing you spent more time with your dad after that.
Yeah.
His sister stayed with Mattie, while Prince was made to shuttle between his mother and his father. Soon, Prince was bringing girls back, flouting his father's authority and testing his affection.
And then you and your dad didn't get along. And when you were 12, he threw you out for fooling around with a girl, is that right?
I called my dad, and I begged him to take me back after he kicked me out. But he said no. So I called my sister and asked her to ask him to take me back. So she did. And afterwards, she told me that all I had to do was call him back and say I was sorry.
Dad, please just wait. I just want to come back in the house. I'm cold, Dad. Just listen, please, Dad. Dad, just listen to me, please. I won't do it again. Just let me back in the house. Dad, listen to me. Dad, wait. Dad, Dad, Dad.
You were 12 years old, and you didn't have a home?
I sat crying at that phone booth for 2 hours. That's the last time I cried.
Taken in by relatives, Prince would never live with either of his parents again. He wrote about the pain of their rejection in the first best-selling single from his Purple Rain album.
The minute I heard When Doves Cry, I was instantly
Pain
a
of
fan.
Passion.
That first guitar riff, and then just that beat with no bass in it, you know, and it just instantly just kind of grabbed me.
Prince set the scene. He's caught with a girl. The consequences are hard and immediate. His mother's gone, and now his father has pushed him away. Prince blames both his parents, holding them equally responsible for casting him out, and also blaming himself for his isolation.
When Doves Cry, it all speaks to this general lack of security that he had. The fact that he seemed to spend his whole life trying to accumulate a security blanket.
What if everybody around me split? I'd be left with only me.
That's a
I'd have to
fact.
fend for me.
Prince first performed the title track from Purple Rain at the First Avenue nightclub, still standing in Minneapolis. He sings about trying to forgive his parents and made this song the theme tune to his first feature film.
He wasn't a man to talk a lot, but my gosh, his music, he said everything in it. He told you everything that he was thinking and doing in his music. If you want to know what Prince was, just listen to his words.
Purple Rain is one long metaphor for a violent storm of rage followed by a new beginning.
When he said the song is called Purple Rain, I immediately said, yes, it's what's coming down from the heavens. Good. The skies swell with a purple, violet, blue. It's gorgeous. It's threatening, and you know, boy, it's going to come down. Get safe. Or celebrate with a big umbrella.
He was dope. He was definitely a dope artist.
After it was tightened up in the studio, the band members understood
I'm gonna make it interesting for y'all. Who's better, Michael Jackson or Prince?
Purple Rain was Prince's masterpiece.
I don't believe it. You're starting to get it. You're really starting to get it.
Is a funk song that's an orchestral masterpiece, that's a rock song, that's a ballad, that's a metal song, that's a anthem.
Once the royalties started rolling in from Purple Rain, Prince tried to win back the parental approval he craved. He bought his father a car and gave him a house. They played pool together.
Another great break.
You win at this game.
John Lewis Nelson seemed to accept his son back in his life.
Because he got him that car and house.
Back in the game.
Darn it.
Then criticized Prince's music, saying there were too many swear words.
It's real hard for my dad to show emotion. He never says I love you. Whenever we try to hug or something, we bang our heads together like some Charlie Chaplin movie.
I think that's what a lot of parents feel when it comes to being affectionate because of the era they came up in and the way they grew up.
So I'm a hugger. I just love to hug people. I think
Yeah,
it's
there's nothing
a
wrong with it.
great way of expressing, you know, your love and openness. I tried it a couple times with Prince. Strange reaction. He was a person that probably needed and wanted and was craving a hug more than anyone on the planet. And he was so stiff and so shocked. I'm not sure that it had happened much to him before. It was really an alien experience, and I'm not sure that he really understood how to process it. I do believe that it is what he wanted and needed, perhaps more than anything.
By the mid-1980s, Prince had 3 Grammy Awards, 5 sold-out tours, 7 albums, and 8 top 10 hits. Yet it wasn't making him happy.
He says, it's very, very lonely. I know I'm getting fame and everybody loves my music. He says, but I'm so lonely. He says, you're the only person who's ever done anything without wanting something back. He says, everyone around me seems to want something. I don't know what their motivations are, but he says, I know they all want something for themselves. He says, I never dreamt that being famous would be so lonely.
The answer for Prince was to build his own protected world, where he would feel secure and loved. In 1985, construction began on Paisley Park in Chanhassen, a suburb of Minneapolis.
It was an amazing facility. The upstairs was a wardrobe facility where Prince would go and get fitted for his clothing and had custom designed costuming. He had an apartment in there, his full recording studio in each one of the Studio A, Studio B, and then a full video and film facility that he could rehearse his concerts inside. So it was like a creative mecca.
That boy had bread.
So you can live anywhere, New York or LA. Why come home?
Just because I love it here so much. I can go out and not get jumped on. It feels good not to be hassled.
On the way up, it becomes harder and harder of who you can trust. And
Definitely.
I think Minnesotans are kind of a trustworthy bunch of Scandinavians.
He wanted that sense of community, and I don't think he would have got that from LA or New York, and I think that's why he really stayed in Minneapolis.
Paisley Park cost $10 million to build. A colossal 55,000 square feet,
Damn.
as big as the White House. It was above all where Prince could be Prince. He was 28 years old, and this was the first place he could truly call home.
He was known as the Great Gatsby of Minneapolis, or even the Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. I just remember going out there, the first time. I hadn't seen Prince come out yet or anything, but with his band members and everybody else there, they just made you feel welcome and made you feel like a part of the family.
Growing up, Prince's musical talents were ignored by his mother and resented by his father. Paisley Park would house a new kind of family, where Prince and Prince's music would always be front and center.
Prince created this environment which he could control, where his studio could be where he lived, so you could just get up and make a record. You didn't have to go to the record plant or any of the other famous studios.
Or any studios, right.
And this meant that the people around him were on demand. And he could page them and say, I want to make a record now.
Prince built a temple to himself, surrounded it with a wire fence, then expected others around him to follow his path and no other.
He would encourage those of us who worked for him at the time that we opened Paisley, that we should all move out to Chanhassen and be nearby. One day we'll have a gated community and we'll all live inside. And it got to the point where it was starting to get kind of Howard Hughes-ish, Jim Jones-ish, just like when does the Kool-Aid come out? It was a little scary for some of us.
One, two, three, four.
Prince was a workaholic, and he had a reputation for that. I'm going to give an example in a recording studio. He would go in a recording studio, and he might literally be in a recording studio for 20 hours. And the recording engineers, would come and go in shifts because they couldn't keep up.
Can't hear nothing in the morning.
In his career, he had 40 chart albums. Now, his career wasn't even 40 years long, so he just kept doing it.
Unchain my heart. Unchain my heart.
Salute.
Telling you, baby, I got no time for this. Gonna trip. Unchain my heart. Unchain my heart.
I think I worked for 2.5 years straight, almost without any sleep. By the time that I left, I was very exhausted because I always wanted to make sure I gave him what he wanted. I wanted it to be successful. And so I never showed up empty-handed, and I never said no.
Come on.
As a child, Prince made himself a musician through willpower, practicing 7 days a week. At Paisley Park, he rehearsed his band the same way.
Might as well get sturdy.
In order to do production rehearsals, we would come in every day and start wearing our complete stage gear, the actual costumes and clothes that we were going to wear on stage. We would start to perform the show. And literally maybe every 30 seconds or every minute, he would then say, stop.
Wait a minute.
And then we'd say, okay, continue. We'd pick up the song where we left off. We might get another minute into it, and then he'd say, stop. And this would go on and on for 8 to 10 hours a day, day after day.
Gonna pack my bag, baby. Leave him at the door.
In addition to being a demanding perfectionist, he was also a better musician than almost anybody in his bands. He was a better drummer than his drummer. He was a better bass player than his bassist. He was a better guitar player than his rhythm guitar players.
One of the first albums out of Paisley Park was Parade. It featured the single Kiss.
Kiss has its very own acoustic, which makes it distinctive. It stands out when it's played on the radio. And it also has a classic intro. All radio programmers used to say, you have to hook your listeners in the first 10 seconds.
That's a fact.
Otherwise they'll drift. Well, Kiss, well, fine, you've got them in 2 seconds.
Kiss would be a hit, yet Warner Brothers did not like its stripped-down feel. They thought it would never sell.
People be
It's
wrong.
almost the job of record companies to resist the new, because they always want what's already sold. Let's have another one of those. But in fact, the artist always wants to do something new. Try to imagine being Prince. You've already had a decade of album releases, and you don't want to do songs that just sound like the other ones. You want them to sound different. So you have an artist and a record company at odds.
Okay, good, thank you. Prince, this is a sketch. It's a demo. It's not finished, right? Because it sounds like it was recorded in a basement. I mean, we can't put this out. It's not a single. It can't go on the album like this, that's for sure.
Don't play with Prince like that.
What's he say?
He says he doesn't care. It's going out first. It's a new single.
Well, we can't use it. It's not working. I decide. Jesus, this guy's killing me. He's not listening to the label, and the label is what's going to get him anywhere.
Things always had to be the way he wanted them, and if you
Control. He wanted his own
balked
control.
at that, it wasn't just a question of a disagreement among friends. It was a you're a traitor. You're not a believer. You're not truly supportive of me.
Kiss was a top 10 hit in 10 countries. Blind faith in his own work justified everything for Prince. In the Kiss video, he lives and breathes the music.
Not only is he the best mover since James Brown, he's doing it on heels. He was clearly this phenomenon who came to us from a position within music. He was not a human being playing music. He was a channel for music, and it was coming out of him.
We would say in the church, back in the day, we would say he was anointed. That means that he had that special thing that would just grab you and you were transfixed.
Prince was flying in the face of his record company, thrilling his public with new hit songs, whatever the cost.
Prince's life was publicly an explosion of excitement. It was lights, it was dancing, it was music, it was rhythm, it was the soul coming out and dancing in full force. But inside, the man was quietly lost, I think quietly sad, and there was a real dichotomy between what the public saw and who was inside.
Prince went on tour, it made everyone happy, including himself. He was touched by angels on stage. He filled huge stadiums, such as the Love Sexy Tour in 1988. And then, when the music ended, the demons returned. The other Prince emerged, cold, prickly, setting himself apart.
We got to Paris Friday night. It's Good Friday. We go to the clubs, and sure enough, they're dead. There's just no action. So about 2 a.m, we're sitting in a club in a VIP, and worse, you're in a roped VIP section, of course. So not only is the club dead, but you're dead within the dead. And so it's this like drainingly boring situation, and he turns and says, well, you got to admit, it's better than sitting home.
He didn't drink very much. I think he had like a little brandy. Sometimes he'd like a little brandy, but I didn't really see him drink it. He probably just sipped it every now and then. And he literally would just sit there. And we're like dancing to the music, we're trying to not, because the club's like the music's going, and he would just be sat there. And we'd spend the night like that in the club.
Prince lived for the stage.
Just calm and observant.
He couldn't stop. Playing stadium shows, then smaller gigs late into the night, pulling in the crowd.
And so we're there, and he starts playing Purple Rain, and everyone's crying. I love that song, we're all going mental.
Don't you sing?
And then suddenly he turns around and he says, don't you sing? So I turn around thinking, oh, he's talking to someone else.
Put on the spot.
And I'm like, I just couldn't even speak. I was like, it was just...
Ooh.
We've heard that song how many times? Like 100 times, right? Could I remember the whole lyric? I was so nervous. All I could remember was the first line. So what I did was I held the note really long because I couldn't remember the rest of the words because I was scared. Just my imagination. Just my
imagination. Imagination.
Unless he was on stage, there was a barrier between Prince and other people. Very few were allowed in. Photographer Terry Giderson glimpsed the real Prince on tour with him in 1993. Her photographs reveal the unhappiness and isolation others did not see.
Twice, I think it was, that he invited me into his dressing room. The first time was when I made these photos of him in the mirror with all of his makeup, and it was just great. Now, we were in Barcelona. I wasn't familiar with the Sagrada Familia Cathedral at the time, but we pull up to this massive, amazing looking place, and the only light on it is coming from the street light. It's like 4 or 5 in the morning, and this was August, so it was that like pre-dawn light that you could just start to see the spires of the cathedral separating from the background. I'm looking at this light, I'm like, oh God, it's dark. And he says, will your flashlight up the church? I'm like, no, that's not gonna happen. And I shot about a roll, half a roll, whatever. I just watched him, and I just thought, God, this must be such a lonely life for him. I can't imagine a life like that. He looked lonely to me.
That year, when he returned from tour, Prince upped the conflict with Warner Brothers, the record label who nurtured him from the beginning. Prince claimed Warner Brothers held him back as an artist.
Warner's was always trying to slow him down and milk whatever they could out of the current project. They just felt that left to his own devices, he would oversaturate the market. Now, from a business standpoint, that was a very legitimate position. I agreed with them. From a creative standpoint, it frustrated him terribly.
Prince wrote, "If I can't do what I want to do, what am I?"
A slave.
When I ran into him once and he was wearing slave on his cheek, and I just laughed and said, "You're the only slave that owns the plantation."
On CNN, Prince said he was being deliberately confrontational.
Once I started writing slave on my face, I pretty much knew the outcome. I mean, you have to understand that that word on one's face
Holds a
pretty
strong,
much
you know what I'm
changes the dynamic of any meeting that you're in when they see it.
And how did people react to you when they did see it?
Well, the record company didn't really say too much. They just kind of... All right, what's the business at hand today? You know, and that was it.
In 1996, after 3 years of wrangling, Warner Brothers released Prince from his contract.
I can't believe he's gone. And right at a time in his career when he could be able to just sit back and let the money roll in.
Yep.
It just doesn't make any commercial sense. He was like a son to me. I was like a dad to him. The number of times I helped him. He's literally going to have to tour for the rest of his life just to pay for this. It will kill him.
We're on the verge of the period where he starts calling himself by a symbol, and then the artist formerly known as Prince. He goes farther and farther off in this tree limb of self-definition till he almost falls off. And in the 90s, his sales do decline as he's going through all of these identity crises. And I use the word crisis because nobody would have voluntarily done that to themselves in public. Who wants to say, I am now going to become a symbol? And a symbol you can hardly print. I mean, who could do that?
Prince claimed leaving Warner's was an emancipation. He agreed to talk again to Rolling Stone to promote his newfound freedom.
I do what feels good in the moment. I'm not on a schedule, and I don't have any sort of contractual ties. I don't know in history any musicians that have been self-sufficient like this.
Do you ever feel like retiring?
I never felt like I had a job. Does that make sense? So these words, job, retire.
I mean, that's the only thing he had. He never worked a job in his life. He didn't have anything else but music.
With fewer recording commitments and less pressure from Warner's, there was room for Prince to let someone in. In 1996, he married 22-year-old Maite Garcia, a singer and dancer with his band.
I think it was a different period in his life where he had met his true love, and her contribution to all of us is she got him to open up. I think he got to see the sense of what a real life and a marriage and what happiness was about. And she gave us this gift of Prince felt more comfortable and more normal maybe, so he opened up because she encouraged him to open up.
Yet if 37-year-old Prince felt he was finally in control of his life, he was wrong.
I believe Prince could never find love because he didn't know what love felt like.
To heal the pain of his childhood, Prince now said his greatest ambition was to have a child of his own. Two months after Prince married Maite Garcia, she was pregnant. When a scan revealed there was a problem with the pregnancy, Prince refused to accept there was something wrong.
I'd like you to go to a specialist. Your options include having a full chromosome test to see what the problem is, to have a termination, or to go ahead and have the child.
My wife is not seeing a specialist.
You're not allowing me to do my job here. This is bad news. We have to deal with it.
The scan showed the baby had an unusually large head and could be born with serious deformities. Prince insisted the pregnancy must continue, claiming God cured people, not medicine.
Okay. It's not a bad way to think.
On October the 16th, 1996, boy Gregory was born with a rare skull defect, Pfeiffer syndrome.
I got the phone call that, the kid was born and severe disabilities and stuff. I don't know if he ever recovered from that, to be honest. He was devastated.
After 7 days, the staff said there was nothing more they could do. On October the 23rd, they switched off the life support. Boy Gregory died a few hours later.
Damn, rest in peace, man. I know that definitely broke his heart.
He used to say we would have 10 kids together. And I wanted the same. It was my dream to become a mother. So when I found myself pregnant, a couple of months after we got married, we were over the moon about it. It was the best thing that could have ever happened to us.
For me, after that, he wasn't really the same. Didn't really get the phone calls like, come out and hang. It kind of stopped then, around that time. He changed. He changed. To me, he changed at that point.
He was very vulnerable and hurt, you know. You got your kid dying. I mean, what do? You know, his kid died. You know, I mean, that's like, I mean, where does that leave you? It's like you're empty. You're empty. There's nothing. You're just a shell.
Prince would not accept the truth. An interview with Oprah Winfrey to celebrate Prince becoming a father was broadcast a month after boy Gregory died. On Oprah, Prince behaved as if nothing was wrong.
He showed me their newly decorated playroom.
And here's my favorite room.
The children's to be, the children's to come.
Yes, ma'am.
The child in you, or just the
Damn,
children?
look at Prince, man.
And all those rumors about their baby? Well, the artist shared this with us.
It's all good. Never mind what you hear.
Prince was never able to tell his son he loved him, just as his father never told him. Maite's next pregnancy ended
You
in
could tell he was really trying to fill a void for real.
a miscarriage. The strain of the two lost pregnancies broke up the marriage. Prince would never raise a child of his own. A second marriage to charity worker Manuela Testolina also failed. Relationships seemed doomed.
I remember when Kim Basinger had been his significant other for a while, brief while, and had actually come to Minneapolis and was living with him in Minneapolis and holding an office at Paisley Park. Just as suddenly as she appeared, she left, kind of overnight. And that relationship, for whatever reason, only they know, ended abruptly. And he came in my office, as he would often do, and just sat on the desk while we talked about a few things. And I said, "Hey, man, you okay?" "How do you think I'd be?" Then he walked out. Now, the "are you okay" was compassionate. It was intended as, you want a hug? You know, a brotherly, "You okay, dude?"
Checking on him.
And the only thing I could get back was a very snide, "How do you think I'd be?"
After his parents died in 2001 and 2002, Prince became a Jehovah's Witness, a religion sharing many beliefs with the Seventh-day Adventism of his childhood.
He didn't get a chance to repair his relationship with his mother and father, and by going back to the church, I feel that he felt that he was making things right.
Prince wanted to be cleansed and purified by religion. And in 2003, he underwent a full baptism in his local Kingdom Hall.
I mean, where does that leave you? It's like you're empty. You're empty. There's nothing. You're just a shell. And then somebody comes along and go like, hey, man, look, let me tell you something. Read this under this passage here, you know, or whatever and stuff. And they get them, you know. And then you stick with it because you feel that...
It seemed like he basically just wanted to get right and cleanse himself.
If you go away from it, there's something bad's going to happen to you.
So, let me get this right. You've stopped swearing, given up eating meat and drinking alcohol, and are refusing to perform any of your racier songs?
Well, after 4 days, you don't want it anymore. It's like this thing that says, feed me, feed me. When he realizes he's not going to get fed, it goes away.
Prince pushed people away all his life, then looked to God for answers.
Even for someone who made records that were thought to be immoral and beyond lusty and were responsible for the advent of the warning labels on records and so on, this was a guy who, from the beginning of the time I knew him, had a very conservative moral streak underneath all of that.
Both angels and demons were crowding around Prince. The escape was always the music. Yet there would only be a handful more great public performances when Prince would rock the world. In 2004, he guested last minute at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
George Harrison is posthumously inducted. A couple of his bandmates from the Traveling Wilburys, Jeff Lynne and Tom Petty, start While My Guitar Gently Weeps, his Beatles classic. And then,
yeah, he got a whole
around
lot of
minute
classics.
3, in storms Prince, who's only there because he's being inducted. And he does this guitar solo in which he just takes the song to another level. Talk about stealing the show. I mean, he just doesn't get the spotlight on him. He just consumes the whole thing. And for this delicious, delirious minute 20 seconds, he owns the music world. It's one of the greatest solo performances ever, and he knows it, because at the end he throws his guitar up in the air, and he storms off stage as if to say, right, I've done what I came to do, beat that.
After that, Prince was seen less and less in public. He disappeared from view. There was little going on now at Paisley Park, just Prince alone writing music and storing it away in a vault.
So you're
he literally had a vault?
essentially false, except when you go musically. And that's why you start to get into a place where if I just stay in the music world, if I just stay in my music, in my thoughts, then I will be okay. It will save me.
It was just another way of putting up walls between him and everyone else. He was able to withdraw inside, oftentimes not being seen for long periods of time.
No one went back to the root and said, okay, here's how we fix that. It just never got done. If you start building walls, those walls inevitably have to become larger. And then suddenly you realize you're walled in. So you yourself can't get on the other side of that wall. Sure, you're keeping people outside. Sure, you're keeping control over them because you have a big wall. But you're suddenly now isolated behind that wall.
In January 2013, 54-year-old Prince came on stage during the Grammy Awards, his first big public appearance in 6 years. He walked with a stick due to severe hip pain caused by years of dancing.
And why would he have pain? Because he was 5'3" and wore heels for decades. And not only wore heels, but danced on heels. And I mean, even that physical act seems impossible to most of us. How can you even do that?
He pushed himself so hard physically when he was young that I can't imagine that he wasn't suffering some sort of bodily.
Yeah, that definitely reminds me of Michael Jackson. Y'all could go watch the documentary I did yesterday. Like, basically, it's a comparison because they both sacrificed their bodies to give the fans what they wanted.
And from the speakers, I saw him jump off 30 feet, 20 feet. Every night, you know, just perfect 10s. And if they weren't, you'd never know it. So if he landed wrong and it hurt him, you'd never know it.
He played it off smooth then.
I can confirm he had surgery on his hips, and it's what happens when you jump for 40 years onto heels. That's what happens. It's a work-related injury.
Prince had a secret. His clean living days were over. As his health collapsed, he started taking a variety of powerful medications to deal with the crippling pain. He was becoming hooked on opioids. In his last interview with Rolling Stone, Prince deflected any questions about addiction.
Were you ever self-destructive?
Was I ever self-destructive? Do I look self-destructive?
Prince was ashamed at the end because he had such a reputation for clean living, which was really true. He was vegan, he was ashamed that he was a drug addict. He looked with disdain on those who really lost their careers via drugs.
I mean, that's the irony with his death, is that it was drug-related, because there were no drugs going on when I was on that concert.
This is a very tough demon to overcome. And it doesn't make you a wild addict, you know, or anything like that. You get on this treadmill of this stuff, and it's one of the leading killers today in the United States. It's just, it's just what it is.
Somebody says, I can fix your hip. So here, your hip, suddenly you feel better. You're able to perform. It still hurts the hip a couple days later. You take another one. And you're now taking 4 a day, 5 a day. Suddenly, everything else starts to break down. Mind, body, spirit starts to break down because of the heaviness of this narcotic. So then what happens? Now you need it because everything hurts.
Yeah, now you basically make your body depend on it now.
It hurts to breathe. It hurts to wake up. It hurts to go to sleep.
In January 2016, Prince tried to end the rumors of ill health by announcing he was back in the game with his solo piano and microphone tour.
Maybe this was his way of saying, I'm trying. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm trying to come back. Let me, you know, just do these songs.
This is what I like to do at this time of night. Some of these songs get real emotional for me. Real emotional.
I remember Prince having a full-on band, huge production, and suddenly here he was with just this piano. I couldn't believe it. I'd never seen him stripped down like that. And then you think his father was the one that taught him how to play the piano. So he's gone all the way back to try to recreate that moment.
When I was a boy, I thought I'd never be able to play like my dad. And boy, he never missed an opportunity to let me know about it.
At 57, The same old demons were still haunting Prince, talking about his father, singing about his mother.
Sometimes, like a motherless child.
Prince was performing Motherless Child in his later years.
Sometimes, I feel like a
Motherless child.
Clearly, this all went to his background.
Sometimes I feel.
And his issues with his mother and father.
Sometimes, I feel
Like a motherless child.
like a motherless child.
It was so apparent to me that his life had come full circle. I saw it, just stripping it down. To me, he was literally stripping everything away, preparing himself to go.
Sometimes
I feel like a motherless child.
No way from home.
Home.
Prince launched the tour in the safety of Paisley Park.
I love that
and
song
took it on
too.
the road just like the old days. But then things started to go wrong. On April the 14th, Prince flew home from 2 shows in Atlanta.
990 Chicago Center, send up pilot discretion to maintain 3000, Molina altimeter is 3012.
Prince passed out and could not be revived. He was with singer Judith Hill and his bodyguard Kirk Johnson.
990 clear for approach to the Quad City Airport. Was it a male or female passenger?
One male passenger, jet 990.
B990 CFR will be waiting. They want you to go to the on the west end of the north ramp.
So why somebody said something about him pacing back and forth in front of a store or something like that, knowing that he was gonna die if he
At
passed on a plane or
1:18
something like
a.m.,
that.
Prince's private jet made an emergency landing in Moline, Illinois, just 48 minutes by air from Minneapolis. Prince's medical issues, clearly some kind of overdose, were so acute they couldn't wait. On Prince's person, medics found fentanyl, a painkiller,
Damn.
lidocaine, a local anesthetic, and U-4770, a synthetic drug 8 times more powerful than morphine. Prince pulled through, just. Later, it became clear the pills he carried with him were prescribed to someone else. They were mislabeled as being weaker than they really were. Prince was in denial and others were colluding.
The bigger you become, the more people say yes to you. And I've kind of nicknamed it death by yes. The person who stands up to you and says no is the person who cares the most.
That's a fact. Because for the simple fact that having yes men around you will cause you to do nothing but crash out and fail and make you think that everything you do is right when it's not.
I remember hearing voices from afar and saying to myself, follow the voices, get back in your body.
It was a near-death experience for Prince, and it was covered up.
Then I heard about the emergency landing of the plane on the Friday night and was concerned and got in touch with someone at Paisley whom I knew and was assured that he was in fact okay, that he was back in Minneapolis, that it had been a scare, but he was okay. But it was almost like I was hearing a press release. It wasn't, even though I knew this person, there was something else going on that I could, I could tell.
2 days later, Prince insisted a late-night performance at Paisley Park must go ahead, yet he seemed fragile.
This is the first thing my dad taught me how to play.
Something really was off about that night. A lot of us weren't really kind of dancing. It was just kind of a mediocre type mood in a way, where I remember when he showed us the piano and he started playing Chopsticks, yeah, something kind of like clicked in me, like, am I seeing Prince play for the last time?
And then Prince
Wow.
said something his fans would never forget.
Save your prayers for a couple of days. I'm here and I'm okay.
Despite nearly dying on the plane, in the days following, Prince was still using medication. On Wednesday, April the 19th, witnesses saw Prince, dressed in black, pacing a parking lot outside a pharmacy in a
This is what I'm talking about. So it was true?
mall near his home. He looked worried and upset. It was the last time he was seen alive.
So it was true?
Early the following morning, Thursday, April the 21st, there was a surprise visitor to Paisley Park. Andrew Cornfield, a young medical student. He was sent by his father, an addiction specialist. Worried by Prince's drug use, he asked his son to look in on Prince.
Hello? Hi there. Yeah. Hey, you want to see address here? Yeah, we need an ambulance right now.
Okay.
We have someone who's unconscious.
Okay, what's the address?
We're at Prince's house?
Okay, does anybody know the address? Is there any mail around that you could look at?
Yeah. Okay, hold on.
Your cell phone's not going to tell me where you're at, so I need you to find me an address.
Yeah, we have,
Okay, get me the address, please.
I have, so the person is dead here.
Emergency
Damn.
services in Minneapolis arrived on the scene at 9:43 a.m. At 10:07 a.m., Prince Rogers Nelson was pronounced dead.
Good evening. Music fans everywhere are reacting to the stunning loss of pop superstar Prince, one of music's most unique and dynamic performers who gave us such hits as Purple Rain and Little Red Corvette.
I just can't believe it's true. I just can't believe it. I just can't believe he's gone.
On June the 2nd, 2016, the autopsy report was published. Prince died of a fentanyl overdose, a synthetic morphine 50 times stronger than heroin.
Fentanyl is no joke. Okay.
There was no one in the immediate arena that could say, this stops right now. And so you end up what you end up with. Tragic and awful and surprising and hurtful, and everybody's at a loss to truly explain it.
The toughest thing for me to hear was that he died alone in an elevator after having an incident on an airplane. That told me that there were too many yeses and not enough no's at the expense of somebody's life. I'm not blaming someone for his death by any means. What you do to yourself.
Right.
But it told me that there were too many yeses.
I'm screaming in my car. Prince! Screaming at the top of my voice. What? Why? What? Because I couldn't understand it. I couldn't get past it. You know? It was just a shock. I just couldn't believe it.
So looking down the road, is there an endpoint?
It's just so nice to know that there is someone and someplace else. And if we're wrong, then I'm wrong. And there is nothing. A big deal. But the whole life I just spent, I at least had some reason to spend it.
Prince spent his entire adult life making music, yet the music could not save him.
I'm not sure that having helped make Prince famous and help make Prince achieve his dreams was ultimately what he needed. And all I had done is introduce him to a nice girl.
Oh yeah, also, can somebody in the comment section let me know what those symbols mean by any chance?
He had had a couple of children and gone to work at the factory and grew up as an old man sitting on his rocking chair, never famous. I think perhaps maybe I would have been more proud of that.
Man.
I believe I can say for sure that Prince was the loneliest person I ever met in my life.
We used to call him the lonely guy because we didn't want him to be lonely. He had all his friends here. We are the people that loved him.
Damn.
We are the ones that loved him when he didn't have nothing. He had nothing, and we loved him. So, God. Somebody should have been with him. He should have never been alone, ever. And I'm still not over it. It's very painful. Not over it. As you can see. Just not over it.
And rest in peace to Prince, man. Man, that was beautiful. That's definitely gonna wrap up this video. With that being said, rest in peace to Prince. I appreciate y'all for all the love and support. Let me know what's your favorite music by him, what's your opinion on him. Love is love, and I'm gonna catch you in the next video.